Hey folks, I'm back with another one. I gotta say I was really impressed with the numbers that my last video got. Uh, by far the most views of anyone that I've put out so far, and actually a couple of comments which just tickled me to death, because I really, you just don't know how much I appreciate the interaction, you know. Got a couple of comments there. One was just a short, nice, you know, bless you. And the other one kind of took me to task for a few things I said in the last video, but in a nice way, you know. And I encourage that. I encourage that. You know, as long as everything stays respectful and and clean and doesn't devolve into name calling and stuff like that, yeah, that's great. You know, because honest, clean debate is one of the things that I really like. So a shout out to the couple of people that did comment. I encourage uh, more people to comment. Um, whether you like what I say, whether you agree with what I say, or whether you've got an issue with something I said. Like I said, I'm a big boy, I can handle it. So today I'm going to go into the story of the house. Right quick before I do that, before we actually get into the story of what happened in that house when I was younger, I just wanted to point out that people come to God in different ways. Some people were born into a religious household. They grew up that way. Their parents instilled that belief in them, and they carried that on into their adulthood, and they grew into it. Some people are just, living their life buck wild, and something will happen, maybe something bad will happen, or maybe they'll just get this calling all of a sudden, kind of like a come to Jesus meeting, and that's the way that they come into the fold. Now, I always kind of describe the way I came in as kind of through the back door, even though I was saved when I want to say 18, could have been 17. I was 17, 18 years old, and I was saved, and it was genuine from the heart. But I drifted away for a long time. I did. I drifted away for a long time. And it wasn't that I'd lost my belief in God, or that I was really consciously trying to be openly rebellious toward God. It wasn't that. It was just that the ways of the world drew me in, and I lived my life like that for quite a while. And like I say, I'm 62 years old now. It's only been a couple of years since I've really been back. And a lot of times when I pray at night, I say, God, why did you let me wander for so long? Why did you call me back now that I'm a broken down old feller? And and the only answer that I've ever really gotten, and it wasn't really a voice inside my head or a vision or a dream or anything, just a feeling that I've gotten from that is, because you weren't ready yet. And, you know, what do you say? God's got a plan. God's got a plan for everybody. And I guess that I had to go through my time of wandering to really be able to understand and appreciate when I was really called back. And the story I'm going to tell you here in just a second, you know I ramble. Hold on with me. I went through stuff when I was younger in a certain house up in Big Stone Gap, Virginia. That's where I was born and raised. And I mean, it was real. I experienced it. My whole family experienced it. I had close friends experience it. We had extended family members that would stay at the house every once in a while. They experienced stuff. So there was no denying it. There was no like, oh, was that a trick of the light? Oh, are my ears playing tricks on me? There was no denying it. It was real. And so that left me with a hard question. It left me with a lot of hard questions. Because I was not raised in a religious household. And I did not have that foundation. I didn't have the tools that I needed to understand what was going on at the time. And so I basically took the world view of it, which is like ghost, poltergeist, stuff like that, you know. And I ran with that for a long time. You know, I used to be a self-described ghost hunter, you know. I think I mentioned that. I actually went on a couple, you know. I actually had some stuff happen. But I didn't know what I was dealing with, really. And now I've got a better understanding. So when God started calling me back, I mean, he didn't grab me by the collar and jerk me back. You know, he was just gently nudging me back toward where I needed to be. You know, it took me a little while. And I read stuff, you know. Of course, I started reading my Bible again. This time really, really reading it thoughtfully and with as much understanding that I could muster. And it was about that time that I happened, because I think I was convinced by this point that whatever was in the house wasn't a ghost, it wasn't a poltergeist. It was some kind of demonic activity at some level. And so I think I was looking up videos on demons, stuff like that, and I ran across Dr. Michael Heiser's videos, one of his videos, which lays out the Divine Council worldview, and really explains about a lot of the spiritual warfare that's constantly going on around us. And all of a sudden it clicked. It was like I'd been working on a jigsaw puzzle for years, and I was almost there, but I couldn't. There were a few pieces I couldn't get to fit anywhere. And after I watched a couple of his videos, and I ordered his book right after that, and read his book, all of a sudden, everything fell into place just as neatly as could be. And so that's what I mean by coming in kind of through the back door. I had a supernatural experience, many, that could not be explained away. They happened. It was a fact. I had to live with that fact. So now I was looking to explain what that was. And once I started getting into Heiser's videos, into his books, and everything started making sense. So that's what I mean by coming in through the back door. You know, I had something bad happen to me, and that in turn, over several decades, finally brought me back in to where I needed to be. Not through the front door of the church, kind of slipped me in through the back door. But I was still there. Okay. I was still back to where God wanted me to be at this moment. So the story. Let's get into the story. We're already 11 minutes into this video and I haven't even talked about it yet. When I was 13 years old, my dad worked for the phone company, same as I did. My mom, at the time, she had several jobs. I mean, I think she had some secretarial jobs. She worked for a car dealership for quite a while. But, you know, it was basically both parents working. And we were living in a little house. I think it was only a 2-bedroom, maybe. So my sister, who was a baby at the time, she's 7.5 years younger than me. And hey, sis, if you're watching this and you want to get on and verify what I'm saying, you know, feel free. But Mom and Dad got up enough money to buy some land and build a brand new house, which they did. Now, the property where this house would be located probably was no more than a quarter, half a mile from where we actually lived at the time. But you had to kind of take a path through the woods to get to it. That was the easiest way. You could go down and walk the road and walk back up. It'd take you twice as long. But there was actually a path that would go through the woods from the house where we lived to where they cleared out to build the new house. And so they bought the land, they got the construction started on the house. And at that time, like I said, I was 13. And at the time, Mom and Dad were both smokers. And back in the late 70s, early 80s, that was still kind of a cool thing to do. You know, it's not like it is today. So me, being a 13-year-old boy, when they got the house up, when they got it all framed up and got it under roof and everything, wasn't completely finished yet, but, you know, it had walls and it had a roof on it. A lot of times I would snake a couple of my mom's or dad's cigarettes, you know, and a book of matches. And during the evening times, I would say, hey, I'm going for a walk in the woods, which wasn't unusual because I grew up a mountain boy. You know, I spent a lot of time in the woods. But what I would do is I would go across that little path there to where the new house was at. And all the workers had gone home for the day by that point. So I would actually go inside the house and go up the stairs and actually sit in what ended up being my mom and dad's the master bedroom. And I would sit there and light me up a cigarette and sit there and smoke it. And you know, it's dusky dark, or maybe even completely dark at this time. And I'm feeling like a big guy because I'm over here smoking a cigarette, you know. And the funny thing is that I never felt anything out of place. And I was a scaredy kid. I was. I was a real nervous, scaredy kid. I was the type of kid that kind of liked to be scared for the adrenaline rush, but then I couldn't go to sleep at night, or I wanted to leave all the lights on when I went to bed because I was scared, you know. So I'm a kind of skittish kid anyway. But, I mean, you know, the dozen or so times that I did that before they actually got the house built and we moved into it, I would sit over there in the middle of the woods in this unfinished house, smoking my cigarettes, feeling like a big old boy, and I felt completely calm. I never felt anything threatening or you know, I never got spooked. Then they finished the house and we moved into it. Well, like I said, Mom and Dad both worked. I was probably the high school I went through was 8 through 12, so and you went in 8th grade, you were considered a sub-freshman. A lot of high schools I know they're 9 through 12, but ours was 8 through 12. At 13, I was probably a sub-freshman in high school. And Mom and Dad both worked. My sister was way too young for me to watch, and rightfully so. My mom and dad had enough sense not to not to entrust me with watching her until they got home from work. So she would stay with my mama, who lived a mile and a half down the road. So when I would come in from school, 3:30, whatever it was, I'd have an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours before either my mom or dad got home. Because whoever got off work first had to go pick up my sister and then bring her home. And like I said, I'd still not felt anything wrong with the house, the property, or anything, you know. I was thrilled with it. I mean, it sat right up against a bank that led up into the woods there up on the top of the mountain. I loved going out and playing in the woods, playing on the mountain, stuff like that. But maybe had to be at least a month, maybe 2 months into this. I was up in my bedroom. All the bedrooms were up on the 2nd floor. The downstairs you walked in, you had a big kind of family room den. There was a fireplace. That's where the TV was at. This was before cable TV, so we still had one of those antennas back out on the hill back behind the house. And when they wanted to change channels, guess who got to go out there and turn the antenna, whether it was summertime or 20 below zero, you know, whatever. But anyway, that was downstairs. There were a couple of spare bedrooms. Well, they weren't really bedrooms. They were just spare rooms downstairs. There was a bathroom, and then there was kind of a partially unfinished basement back in the back. You went up the stairs. You had to go through the little family room thing, and you go up the stairs. And you would come up the top of the stairs. You could either turn left and walk into the kitchen, Or you could turn right, go down a little hallway. There was another bathroom, and then there were 3 bedrooms up there. The master bedroom, my sister's bedroom, my bedroom. Well, like I say, maybe a couple months in, I was in my bedroom. I'd just gotten home from school. I was the only one there at the house. And I'm in there doing whatever I was doing, maybe reading a book. Back at that point, seems to me like I was really big into model rockets, you know, the kind that you could actually put together and use the little engines and actually shoot them off. They'd go up a couple 100 feet in the air and a little parachute would open and they'd come back down. I was into making those and other models. I used to love making models of like World War II era naval ships, stuff like that. Anyway, I'm in my bedroom, minding my own business, and as clear as day, I can hear my mom. I heard my mom call to me, and it wasn't just, did I hear that? I mean, it was loud. Like, she was downstairs, maybe she just came in the front door and she's yelling at me because she knows I'm up in my room, you know, or whatever. I mean, it was loud. And it was unmistakable. It was her voice. There was no doubt in my mind. I didn't stop for 1 second and say, who is that? You know, I just said, oop, Mom's home. So I go out. Well, being 13 years old, you know how you are at 13, you know. You don't want to get up unless you have to. I was like, what? No answer. And so I get up and I leave my bedroom. I go up to the top of the stairs and I holler down again, Mom, what? No answer. So I go all the way downstairs. Well, I can't find anybody. And then I walk out the front door, and we only had 2 vehicles. Dad had an old truck. Mom had whatever kind of car she drove at the time. I can't exactly remember. There was no vehicle there. There was nobody there except for me. Now, when I get to this part, a lot of people say, well, what'd you do then? Well, I stood there for a minute and I scratched my head and I went back upstairs. And they're like, after hearing your voice called, and you know you heard your voice called, clear as a bell, and then finding out that you're alone in that house, there's nobody there, you didn't think to like maybe leave? And truthfully, no. Because the first time it happened, there's always, your human mind is always going to try to come up with some kind of logical explanation. Well, I guess I didn't hear what I thought I heard. You know, I'm not feeling any sense of dread. You know, there's nothing else like that going on. You know, I'm not feeling uneasy, other than the fact that, yeah, this is kind of weird, but it is what it is. You know. And so I went back upstairs and went back to whatever I was doing until somebody actually did show up. I don't even think I mentioned it. I'm pretty sure I didn't mention it. But that was the start of it, and this started happening pretty regularly whenever I was home by myself. And it would always be either my mom's voice or my dad's voice. Never anything else. Never a strange voice. Never a voice where I might have, you know, questioned, oh, who in the world's that? You know, yelling at me. I don't recognize that voice. Something that might have really got me upset and panicked me, you know, and made me leave. It was always in one of their voices, clear as a bell. Them shouting at me. Not just calling to me, but shouting at me. And I would always think, you know, oh, well, they need help carrying in the groceries, or they want me to go do some type of chore or something like that. And every time I would come out of my bedroom and there would be no one there. I got to where I wouldn't even bother going downstairs and looking. I would just walk into my mom and dad's bedroom, which had a big window there where you could see all in front of the house. And I would just look and see if there were any vehicles parked there. And if there weren't, then I knew it was just whatever it was that was messing with me was messing with me. And was it unnerving? Yeah, it was unnerving, but it wasn't enough to put fear into me. Not the kind of fear that it would have took, to make me take off and leave the house and not come back until I knew somebody was home. This went on for a while, and I may have even mentioned it to Mom at some point. Dad was not the type that you would go to with something like that, because he didn't believe in any of that crap, even though he ended up living through and experiencing a lot of it, and to the point where he had to admit, yeah, something's going on. But I think maybe I did mention it to Mom, maybe the third or fourth time it happened. I was like, I keep hearing either you or Dad hollering at me, and when I come out, there's nobody here. And she kind of brushed it off, because I was a pretty imaginative kid even back then. And that went on for a while. So I believe that I was the first one to actually experience any kind of activity in the house. Then after a while, that kind of stopped. Like, whatever it was, it figured, well, I pulled this on him so many times, it's not even really funny to watch anymore, Let's move on to something else. So the next thing that started was in the evenings. Like I said, the TV was downstairs in the big family room, So we would all be gathered there at night, me and my sister, my mom and dad, watching TV. And all of a sudden you would hear somebody walking down the hallway upstairs. There's no mistake. People, especially in the movies, it's a house creaking, well, this wasn't an old house, this was a brand new house. And let's be honest, you can tell the difference between actual footsteps walking and the house making noises. And it would always start like they just came out of my mom and dad's bedroom, which was on the far end of the house, and they would come all the way to the top of the steps where you could either turn and come down the steps or go into the kitchen, and they'd stop. And the first time, it freaked every one of us out, even Dad. Not because Dad thought that there was anything supernatural going on. Dad was, certain that there was somebody in the house. And so he goes running up the stairs. And we're all sitting down there like, waiting for him to come back, Mom hollering at him every couple of seconds. You see anything? Are you okay? Talk to me, Well, finally he comes back downstairs and he just shakes his head. There's nobody up there. And Mom was like, well, are the doors locked? Because there were two upstairs doors. One you could enter or exit from the kitchen, and then one right outside the kitchen where you could go out onto the deck that ran around the top of the house there. He said, I know, I checked the doors, the windows, they're all locked. There's nobody up there. And there's no way anybody could have got in. This went on for years. But it wasn't a never night thing. It was random. It's something that could happen one week And it might happen 2 nights later, or it might not happen again for 2 or 3 weeks. But it was fairly constant. So at this point, I'm starting to get a little concerned, you know. I may be 13, 14 years old, but, you know, I've watched enough, you know, stuff on TV, you know, and stuff like that, Twilight Zone and stuff like that, that I'm like, you know, something ain't right here. But again, I have no kind of religious background, basis, foundation to lay anything on. I know what my worldly self knows, which is ghost, poltergeist. Demons didn't even enter into it until maybe when the Amityville Horror came out, you know, and they kind of started talking about demons there. But so everyone in the family experienced that. So those are 2 things that happened to me personally that I can say I know and I saw. Other things happened to other people in the family. Now, another thing that happened just to me, and this was the only time I did leave the house, was it was summertime. We were on summer break from school. My mama was still watching my sister, because by this time maybe I'm 15, maybe about 15 years old. But, you know, still not responsible enough to watch my kid sister all day long. So they would leave me at the house, you know, when they went to work. They would take my sister down to my mama's. And so what I would do is whenever I woke up and ate me a bowl of cereal or frozen waffle or whatever I had for breakfast, you know, I'd go out and get on my bike, ride down the hill. We had a pretty long driveway that was wooded. Now, I want to put in here that our nearest neighbor was only a couple 100 yards away, but you couldn't see them. You couldn't see them because of the trees, because there was like just one little path cut out there for the driveway. During the wintertime, you could kind of see the other houses, but if it was summertime and the leaves were out, you fairly isolated right up in there. You couldn't see. So I would get on my bike and I would go down. I had some friends that lived a couple blocks down the road that were around my age. And we'd go out and we'd ride bikes, you know, we'd get into all kinds of stuff, you know. And usually somewhere around noon, 1 o'clock every day, everybody would break up and go back to their house for lunch, you know. And then we'd all come back and congregate again. Well, one particular day, and I remember it was a beautiful day. It sticks out in my mind. Beautiful day. It's nice and sunny. Because, you know, in the movies, most of this stuff always happens when it's dark at night, right? Yeah. One day we were out playing, you know, riding our bikes. We would make ramps and jump Tonka toys like Evel Knievel, stuff like that. And everybody decided they were going to go home and give them a bite to eat. So I go back home, and I go into the kitchen, got stuff out of the refrigerator, out of the cabinet, made myself a ham sandwich, had some potato chips, something to drink. And there was an old radio that was, I'd say it was a 60s model, maybe very, very early 70s model radio. It was about the size of a bread basket, you know, wood finish, the way they had them back then, tube radio. And I came in, and before I started eating, I turned it on to one of the rock and roll stations, local rock and roll stations, so I could listen to that while I was eating. And I got about 4 or 5 bites into my sandwich, and I hear, it was on a certain station, I heard it start moving. You know, I was hearing, and I look up at it, and I'm only 6, 7 feet away from it. And I could see it had a little red indicator, you know, that would show you what station you were on. And then it had a big silver dial over here on this side that you turned it, you know. Wasn't no such thing as remote controls back in them days. I could see the little red indicator just slowly going down the dial. And then I looked at the dial itself and could actually see the dial physically moving. Now that day I left the house. I didn't come back till I knew good and well that somebody was there. And that freaked me out. I had a bad feeling that day. It was no good feeling at all. I had a bad feeling that day. I mean, whatever was there had decided it was going to get me good, you know, and it did. I mean, I took off like a bat out of you know where, jumped on my bike, and I didn't look back, you know. I remember coming back home and Mom fussing at me, saying, "Why'd you leave half a sandwich and all this stuff laying out on the table?" And I'm like, "Mom, the radio started tuning itself over here, you know." And my mom was kind of getting into some of this New Age stuff at the time. I mean, she was always into the Native American stuff, and she was getting into the crystals and stuff like that. And so I don't think she totally dismissed me, but I really don't think that she really actually, I don't know if she actually totally believed me or not. Because like any kid, you know, I could come up with a good lie at the time, you know, to cover myself, you know. But, I mean, there would be no reason to leave a half-eaten sandwich there, you know, unless I had really got spooked and left the house, and I did. So those are the things that I personally can account for that happened to me. Now we'll go on to some stuff that happened to other members of the family and a couple of my friends and stuff that just adds on to it. And a lot of this stuff I didn't know years later, because Mom was kind of tight-mouthed about stuff. Dad was kind of tight-mouthed about all this stuff, mainly because he didn't want to believe anything like that was going on. You know, he was a down-to-earth type of guy, you know. If he couldn't see it, if he couldn't feel it, if he couldn't smell it, touch it. Now, Mom was more of a believer in that kind of stuff, but I think, I'm pretty sure the bus had run, so me and my sister had just left to go to school. My mom, I'm pretty sure, was working at a car dealership up towards Norton at the time. I think that's where she was working. Don't quote me. But I think that's where she was working. And inside their bedroom, they had their own bathroom in there. So the house actually had 3 bathrooms. But of course, we kids, we weren't supposed to be in their bathroom. You know, we could use the other 2. So she's sitting there and she had a vanity. And she had this little, if memory serves me right, it was like a little wicker stool, you know. It was probably a couple feet high, you know. And she would sit down there in front of the vanity and put on her makeup and do her hair and stuff before she'd go to work. And she told me this years later. She said that she was in there, you know, putting on her makeup, normal morning, and she'd put on a little makeup, glance down, put on a big mirror here, you know. She said all of a sudden she looked up and was getting ready to put on whatever makeup she was putting on. And she said, "Scott," she said, there was something in that mirror looking out at me, and it wasn't me. She said, I don't even know how to explain it, other than pure demonic looking. And it startled her so bad that she actually fell over backwards off that little stool. And it messed up some of the vertebrae in her neck. And I mean, to this day, she still has some health problems, that pertain to that incident right there. I'm pretty sure, if I'm remembering right, this was the same day that, of course, having something like that happening to you, looking up and seeing something like that, when she was able to get up, she said that she wasn't even really dressed. It was cold outside. It must have been during the winter. And she said I don't even think she stopped to grab her coat. I think she grabbed her pocketbook, had her keys in it to the car. She runs out to the car. Well, guess what? The car won't start. So she gets out of the car and runs at least a quarter of a mile, maybe a little bit longer, down to the main road. And the only thing she knew to do was go down to my mama or her mama's house. The one that kept my sister and that basically raised me when I was really little too. That's the only place she knew to go. There weren't cell phones back then. She sure as heck wasn't going back in the house for any reason. So she planned on walking down to my mama's house and, using the phone there and calling Dad. And just so happened that one of her friends, it could have been one of her co-workers maybe, but it was one of her friends, somebody she knew, happened to be coming along the road and stopped and looked and said, what are you doing out here? It's 30 degrees outside. You don't even have a jacket or a sweater or anything on. What are you doing walking? Of course, Mom didn't want to tell her why. Because back then, this is before all the ghost hunting and all the paranormal stuff became vogue, and cool to talk about. So she wasn't about to tell her why. She didn't want to end up in a nut house. So she made up some excuse, and she said, I'm just trying to get down to Mom's. Car won't start. And, I need to get hold of my husband and everything. And the lady was like, well, I'm going this way. I can drop you off at work. If you want to go on to work, I can drop you off there. Or I can take you down to your mom's. And so Mom said, well, if you'll take me on by work, I'll just go on into work. And I can call my husband from there. Well, when they got home that evening, Dad went to go look at the car, and the first thing he did, like anybody would do, like I would do, would be to try it just to make sure, or to see what kind of noise it's making before he popped the hood on it. Started right up. Now, I know a lot of this stuff sounds like cliche, because, you've seen this stuff in the movies 100 times. The car won't start. The phone's dead. Whatever, That's how they make horror movies work, But this is actual fact. This stuff actually happened. We used to have a pond out in the front of the house where Dad actually had fish in it. The flood of 77 took that out. But anyway, Mom said she was standing down there one day just looking into the water, watching the fish. And she said she actually felt hands on her back. Something shoved her into that pond. I don't think she got hurt really bad that time, but it scared the bejesus out of her. My sister, when she got older, and I think I was already out of the house by this time, but my sister came home from school one day, and nobody else was there, and she was used to that, same as I was back when I was younger. And so she comes inside and starts to go up to her room, and she said out of the corner of her eye she caught a glimpse of movement, and she looks, and she said there was like this, like a black mass over beside her, kind of in the corner, and it moved over to block her from going back out the house. And so she had no recourse other than to go run upstairs. Now she could have, if she'd been thinking, she could have run out one of the top doors, went outside and went outside the house. She wasn't thinking. She runs straight back to her bedroom, locks the door. And she said the thing chased her the whole way. But when she said when she got into her bedroom, you know, nothing tried to follow her in. She used to have these little figurines. She used to collect these little carousel figurines, like you would see on the old-timey carousels, the horses and the lions and stuff like that. She had two of them. One was a jet black stallion. And I mean, that thing had the meanest look on its face. You know, I don't know who made that thing, but they were in a bad mood today. They made that one. It just had the meanest expression on its face that a horse could have, you know. And the other one was either a lion or a tiger. I can't remember which. Again, hey sis, if you see this, you can clarify. But every night before she'd go to bed, and it's got to be a thing with her, she would position them to where the horse was facing one way and the lion or the tiger was facing the other way. And every morning when she woke up and looked over there, they were both turned looking towards each other again. Dad even later on in life admitted to me that he had heard Mom calling his voice when she wasn't there. There's a lot of things that I'm sure I'm skipping over. And I know, you know, compared to watching something like the Amityville Horror or any kind of modern horror movie, The Conjuring or something like this all sounds kind of tame, you know. But, you know, I had one of my buddies, when I graduated high school, Mom and Dad had bought a boat, and they used to like to go to the lake on weekends. Well, me being 18 years old, whatever I was at the time, I wasn't much on going on the family things anymore, you know, and stay home. So I invited one of my buddies over to spend the night. And when you came up the top of the stairs, like I said, you turned to go down towards the bedroom. Well, there's also another door here. This was led into the formal dining room and living room. Now, as kids, even as older kids, we weren't allowed in there. She had real nice furniture in there. Everything had to be just perfect, you know. You didn't go in there for any reason unless she asked you to go in there. Or unless we were hosting like Thanksgiving, Christmas, something like that. Then that's where we would have our dinners at. So it was kind of an off-limits place. And my buddy shows up, and we're hanging out for a while, and we decided to go up to my bedroom. And as he was walking past that door, he said, "What's behind that door?" He said, I've never been in there. I've been in this house plenty of times, but I've never been behind that door. I said, that's just like the formal living room, you know. I said, Mom freaks out if any of us go in there. I said, but you can open the door and look at it if you want to. And I kind of continued walking down the hall towards my room. And I hear my buddy open the door, and it's like a split second later, he slams it. And I look back at him, and he's white as a ghost. And I said, what in the world's wrong with you? He said, well, when you open the door there, you're looking at these two big kind of almost like bay windows, right? He said, how far are those windows off the ground in the back of the house there? I don't know. At least 4 or 5 feet off the ground, you know. And he said, dude, he said, as soon as I opened that door and looked in, he said, there were two red eyes looking through that window right back at me. And I'm like, well, welcome to my life, bud. I had an aunt that lived, I'm thinking maybe, I want to say somewhere, she was out west, California, Arizona, someplace like that at the time, Nevada maybe. And one of my other aunts had passed away, and so she came in for the funeral. And since there weren't a lot of motel choices around town during that time, she stayed with us. We had the room. I don't even think I was there at this point. I think I was married to my first wife. But anyway, she decided to camp out in the formal living room there. Just sleep on the sofa in there for the night. And Mom and Dad told me later, said, you know, it was like the middle of the night, early in the morning. Said all of a sudden I heard this god-awful scream and footsteps just running down the hall. And my aunt came through that door, almost busted the door off the hinges, took a flying leap and landed in between my mom and dad in the bed there, whimpering. And they asked her, they said, what in the world is wrong with you? What happened? And she never would tell. She passed away back in January of this year. And I wished I'd got the opportunity to, if she would have talked about it, to find out exactly what she saw or heard, or whatever it was completely terrified her. Like I say, there's a lot of things I know I'm missing. If my mom or my sister or my particular buddy that happened to be there that night, if you happen to be on here watching any of this, you can chime in and back me up a little bit, you know. But all this stuff happened. And that's what started my compulsion, I guess, with supernatural stuff. And it even happened once. Well, I had two separate things happen during one stay. When my first wife and I divorced, I left the house that we were living in. I had nowhere else to go and really didn't have the money for a place to stay, so I had to go back and stay with Mom and Dad for a couple months. And this is years, so I'm an older guy. At this time, I'm getting closer to 30. And instead of going back to my old bedroom, which they'd kind of made into a junk room by this time, I bought me a bed, and I used one of those downstairs rooms that were just basically being used for nothing. I used one of those for my bedroom. That way, when I would get up in the mornings, I wouldn't disturb, Mom or Dad upstairs if they were still in bed, or if I came in late at night, I wouldn't disturb them, coming in and going to bed. And during this time, my mom was going through some real bad health issues. So even though she was working, you never knew when you got up in the morning if she had got up and gone to work, or if she was too sick and she was still up there in the bed. And by this point, I'd kind of struck up a relationship with this other old girl. And she was in the habit, she would call my house. Like I say, it's still before cell phones. She would call the house, about 8 o'clock in the morning, a little bit after 8. And which was fine if Mom wasn't there. But if Mom was laying upstairs with a migraine headache or sick, she would really let me have it. Let me tell you. You tell that girl don't be calling here early in the morning no more. And I told the old girl 2 or 3 times, I said, don't call that early in the morning, because I never know if my mom's going to be, if I'm not up, I can't make it in there to the phone quick enough before it wakes her up, Well, I lay there in bed one morning. I think I just had barely woke up, and I heard the phone ring. I'm like, oh no. So I jump out of bed and I run in my underwear in there and grab the phone off the wall, and sure enough, it's her, Well, at the same time I'm answering the phone with her, I hear stomping footsteps. Not just the kind of footsteps we would hear back in the day. These were angry, furious, stomping footsteps coming out of my mom's room up there and heading down the hall. And there was no doubt in my mind whatsoever that, okay, Mom didn't go to work today. I haven't had a chance to look outside or do anything else, So I didn't know if there was any cars there or not. But, there was no doubt in my mind. I said, oh, God. And I told that girl, I said, you just got me in a whole heap of trouble here. I'll talk to you later. I got to go. Well, I heard the footsteps go to the top of the stairs. I didn't hear them anymore. But I thought, well, she's gone into the kitchen to start the coffee pot, coffee maker, whatever. I've got a few moments here to prepare myself and steady myself, because I'm getting ready to get it. I'm getting ready to get it with both barrels, And so I go back in there, run back in there, and I put some clothes on. And by the time I come back out of the bedroom, I noticed I still hadn't heard anything. So I go up the stairs, look in the kitchen, nobody there. Well, I go back to Mom and Dad's bedroom door, which was closed. And I kind of knocked. Nobody answered. And I opened it up. There's nobody in there. Maybe she's in there in the bathroom. Or, Mom, are you in the bathroom? No answer. So then I go look out the window there that I used to use back when I was younger. Nobody was there with me. Same old thing. Same old trick. Only it was a lot more intense this time, It's almost like whatever it was knew that I would be thinking that, oh man, if Mom's here, she is going to be so mad. And it made those footsteps, pounding footsteps, furious footsteps. And the last thing that I really experienced in the house was just a little bit after that. And I was in my bedroom, asleep, and I kind of start waking up, but it wasn't really like sleep paralysis, but I was having a hard time trying to come awake. And I'm laying on my stomach, which is funny because anybody knows me knows I don't sleep on my stomach. Never do I sleep on my stomach. But I was laying in the bed on my stomach. And I could feel the pressure on my back. It felt like somebody was straddling my back. And I could feel fingers, hands, giving me the greatest back rub, shoulder rub here, And like I say, I hadn't been separated from my wife a couple months at that point, so I was still kind of used to her being in the bed with me. And for the first little bit before I really came conscious enough, you know, I'm thinking, man, this is out of character for her, but Lord, that feels good. Shit, man, I'm loving this neck rub, this shoulder rub here. This is great. And then I hit that point where I was just waking up to where it hit me. There shouldn't be anybody here in the bed with me. And as soon as that thought hit, and I kind of stiffened up a little bit, the whole thing was over. It was gone. Could I have dreamed that? Maybe. But given the history of the house and everything that went on there, I don't really think so. The only other thing I can add, Lord, we've done hit an hour here. If you're still here, bless your heart. My two daughters can also, if they happen to be watching, I know at least my youngest daughter is subscribed to my channel, so maybe she can come on in the comments and corroborate some of this. But when I had both my girls with my first wife, and I think the way it worked out, I had visitation. It was either every weekend or every other weekend. And so I was still living with Mom and Dad at the time, so that's where I had to bring them to, you know, when it was my weekend to get them. And my sister had moved out at this point, so I would sleep downstairs. Mom and Dad would be up there in their room, and they put the girls in my sister's whole room, which was still fully decorated the way she left it, you know. Still had the horse and the tiger, the lion, whatever. And she kind of had a canopy bed, and then straight across from it there was a dresser, had a big giant mirror on it. Well, my girls were young at the time, and especially being in an unfamiliar place, you know, they wanted a night light. So we got one of those little night lights, the old type that you just plug into the outlet, and it was kind of like a single clear Christmas bulb, you know, type of thing. So we would leave on, so they would have a little bit of light in there. Well, I got to noticing that, you know, on weekends I had them, that they would be up before I'd even get up. And they would be downstairs with the TV turned on watching cartoons. We had cable by this time, you know. So they're watching cartoons. They're sitting there on the couch, you know, watching cartoons. And I didn't think much about it. I just thought, well, they woke up early. Kids wake up early, you know. So they came downstairs to, you know, watch TV until the rest of us got up out of bed. And it wasn't until after they were adults that, because we didn't talk about it a whole lot, and even now I don't talk about it a whole lot. I just wanted to make this video just to put it out there, to give you some glimpse of what pushed me in the direction that I'm on right now. But somehow that house came up, you know. And I never said anything to them about weird stuff going on in that house. I mean, who would? What parent would? What, you know, oh, by the way, you know, this place is kind of haunted, so, you know, just wanted to prepare you for that while you're spending the night up here in this strange bedroom. You know, nobody had ever said anything about that to them. And we were all together, and they were both over 18 at this point, I'm sure. And the subject of the house came up, you know, and I made the comment, something along the lines of, yeah, you know, I really didn't want to tell y'all girls this, you know, when y'all were young, but man, there was some strange stuff went on in that house. And they were like, oh, honey, Daddy, we know. I'm like, what are you talking about? And they said, we hated being in that bedroom. We absolutely hated sleeping in that bedroom. Why do you think that we were always downstairs early in the morning watching TV before you'd even get up out of bed? And I said, well, I don't know. Just assumed you got up early, or being in strange surroundings, you know. They said, no, Dad. They said, when we would go to bed at night and have that little night light on, which would just cast enough of a glow, you know, to barely give a little bit of illumination, you know, around the room. They said, we were scared to death. They said, we would lay in the bed and watch the mirror. And I said, what about the mirror? She said, you could see people walking around the room in the mirror. But when you looked away from the mirror, there was nobody there. You look back at the mirror, you see these outlines of people walking around the room. So, I mean, when you've got that many solid eyewitnesses, you know, members of my family and you know, some of my best friends in the world that, you know, that I know wouldn't feed me a line of crap, you know, then you have to face a hard truth, and that hard truth is that the stuff that happened there was real. It happened. It just didn't happen to me. It just didn't happen to another random family member or something like that. All of us experienced something. And even people that didn't live in the house experienced something. Now, as time went on, remember I told you back 45 minutes ago that, excuse me, when all this stuff first started, it really wasn't accompanied with any kind of bad feelings of dread or whatever. Towards the end, it was. I mean, you could actually feel a heaviness in the air. Sometimes when things were happening, sometimes when nothing that you could discern was happening at all. But you would still get that bad feeling. You'd feel like you were being watched, that you weren't alone. So, being confronted with this truth, that I know that this happened, and science can't explain this away, you know, I was forced to look for other answers. And for years I looked for those other answers within the paranormal field, you know. When I was writing the Finn McCoy books, I was real big into the paranormal stuff. I was going on ghost hunts and stuff during that time. And it wasn't until I became familiar with Dr. Heiser's works that everything kind of fell together. And it wasn't too awful long ago that me and my sister were talking, and the house came up. And I said, you know, I said, I used to blame ghosts and poltergeist, stuff like that, for what was going on in the house, but I said, you know what, I don't really think that's what it was now. And she didn't even miss a beat. She just turned around and looked at me and said, no, it was demonic. So she's come to the same conclusion that I have. What type of demon, what type of evil spirit, I don't know. Because a demon that's out to possess is not going to make itself known. It's going to be as quiet as it can, because its ultimate goal is to get inside you and possess you. And these are intelligent beings, and they know that if they show their hand too soon, they could send you running off to the church, and that's going to foil their whole plan. They need you to stay pretty unaware. They need to be kind of like a frog in the boiling water type situation, you know, to where they move in slow enough to where you don't catch on. You're just thinking that these new thoughts and feelings that you're having are just natural. They're just you. So why something would have went through all that trouble, to cause all those disturbances and stuff like that, yet not try to actually take possession of one of us, I don't know. I mean, that's a question I still have. But I mean, that's kind of the story of how I started in the end coming back to God, because I had no clear answers for what happened to me. But I found out when Heiser pointed me in the right direction, and I didn't just watch his videos and read his book and say, even though it did, a light bulb went off. But I went back to the Bible and I started reading the passages. And I said, okay, it's making sense now. That there's actually a spiritual world out there that's not really inhabited so much by ghosts of deceased people or poltergeist or aliens or stuff like that. These are intelligent beings that God himself created, the same as he created us. Maybe not in the same way exactly, but he created them. And some of them rebelled, because they obviously have the free choice, the free will that we have, or else they couldn't have rebelled. Anyway, that's the story of the house. I probably left a ton of stuff out. I mean, that was kind of the high points that I can really, really remember, that's just seared into my brain, Like I said, if any of my friends, family, anyone that wants to hop on the comments and corroborate anything that I said, or give their own version. If I got something wrong, maybe, which I'm not saying I couldn't, because that's been it's been a long time ago. Feel free to do that. And everybody, I mean, you cannot I can't make you understand how thrilled I was when I woke up this morning and saw that the video I made on Sunday actually had 2 comments on it. It was the first time I'd ever got any comments. And now it's become the most watched video so far. And, hey, if you feel like it, hit the subscribe button, Boost my ego a little bit, I think I'm up to 9 subscribers now, which is great, because I've said before, I don't want to have a gigantic following. I'm not a YouTube influencer, okay? I'm just an old hillbilly dummy that wants to share his perspective on things with you, share some of my experiences with you, maybe point you in a direction that you haven't looked before, or maybe you felt uncomfortable looking before, because there's interesting biblical stuff there that you should be aware of. Anyway, this has gone on for almost an hour and 15 minutes. If you've made it this far, kudos to you. But anyway, y'all have a blessed day. Have a good one. And I'll talk to you later.